right, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I hope everybody is well and getting ready to get hunkered down for the oncoming Snowmageddon. My name is Scott Kane. I'm the state E-rate coordinator, working with a good handful of folks at the OET office. We are here to deliver to you today some training on filling out your Form 471 for E-rate. The Form 471 window, I think most of you have already are aware, has opened. It opened yesterday. And I'm sure that there are folks that have been on top of things so much that they've already filed. But seeing as we're very early in the process and early in the window, it seemed like this would be a good time to deliver this training. And actually, the timing worked out really well. Today I'm going to go through, and for what I should back up and give you just a little bit of a housekeeping kinds of things. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to jump in either audio or via the chat. Just say, "Hey Scott, I got a question." I'm open to any of that at any point. And then we will be recording this session. I'm pretty sure you heard me asking Caprice to start the recording. And we will post it to the KDE Media portal, and the link will be provided on the E-rate district collection site, the site where you uploaded your discount data and your Forms 479, which I should thank all of you for diligently doing. We really do appreciate you getting that information to us. It is critical for us at the state level, not only to fill out the state application, but then also to provide support to USAC in your journeys through the E-rate process, particularly as you face questions during the PIA process. We will have data that will be available to us to provide them with the information and third-party support for the students and the projects that you are involved with. I am going to spend the time today primarily focusing on just the mechanics of filling out a Form 471. Those of you who have been through this before, it will be very, very similar to what we've done in the past, so it may be just refresher for you. Those of you who are a little bit newer or are new this year, this might feel a little bit like a fire hose being turned on and being thrown at you all at once. Neither here nor there, really, because quite frankly, whether you're experienced or new or somewhere in between, we are more than happy to sit down with you one-on-one and help you navigate this process. If you have questions at any point, obviously not just today, but then going forward as you go into filling out these forms for yourself, please don't hesitate to give a call, to drop an email, to hit us up on Teams. You can contact myself, you can contact Caprice, you can contact Danielle. You can see the three of us with our smiling faces in the gallery. And again, don't ever hesitate to ask us a question, drop us a line. We're more than happy to help. And quite honestly, I've said this for many, many years. Really, there are no stupid questions in E-rate. And, well, I take that back. There might be one, and that's the one you don't ask. The one you don't ask is kind of the one that's probably going to bite you in places where you'd prefer not to get bit. So please, don't hesitate to give a call, drop an email, and we will be happy to either take time if we have it or schedule time with you to walk you through whatever concerns or questions you might have. So, we're going to take two examples. We're going to run with two very typical examples of Forms 471. The first will be a Category 1 application for lit leased fiber, and we'll touch on some of the details or some of the nuances that are associated with other things besides lit fiber as we go through. But the dark fiber and particularly self-provisioned fiber can be a little bit more daunting. And rather than spending lots of time for just a couple of people, we'll have those couple of people give us a call if you have any questions about going through that process. We'll be happy to walk you through those. But to be able to give an example of every different permutation and combination of the possible types of applications would mean that we'd be here all day, and I know that you don't have all day, and I prefer not to be speaking all day, and I'm sure that, in all honesty, you'd rather not listen to me speak all day. So we'll try and keep this short and trying to keep it focused on the things that are the most common. And speaking of most common, in category 2, we'll take a look at an example that's associated with an application that's based upon a mini bid acquiring equipment and or services from the KETS contracts, the KETS networking and products and services contract. That is probably the most common category 2 applications that we see are filed on a yearly basis. So we will give one example of those as well. But again, if we don't cover specifically the kinds of questions you have or that you run into as you go forward, as always, give us a call. All right, so I think you can see my screen showing the USAC portal training site. So without further ado, once you have logged into your EPIC account, on the upper right hand corner is where we begin all the different kinds of forms, and we're going to click on this link to begin our form 471. This should feel really familiar. You'll see a lot of these similar questions on most of the forms. A form nickname or an application nickname is standard, and it is always going to be something that helps you remember what this application is requesting. There's no right or wrong answer. We're going to save and continue. Are you the main contact person? In most cases, you would probably be saying yes. If you were to be saying no, it's going to ask for who that person is. And if that person is not you, that person will need to be an EPIC user. So you will need to either create for them an account, or you will need to have your EPIC admin, your application, or excuse me, your the portal administrator create an account for that person that you want to have serve as your primary contact. For the holiday summer contact information, you want to make sure that you add this if you know that you're going to be unavailable. It is important primarily as a cover all your bases kind of thing. It is quite possible that that USAC does not get to reviewing your site until, or excuse me, your application until somewhere perhaps into summer. And if you're going to be out of office, they might ping you and say, hey, we need this information, but you're not around to respond. What this does is it clearly defines that you were going to be, and you already announced to them that you were going to be unavailable for this period of time, so that if they were to then, and we've seen this happen, deny your application because you didn't respond, you have grounds for appeal and grounds for successful appeal right here in your initial application, rather than having to fuss with it later or to request at some point down the road a deferment so that your application isn't reviewed during the summertime. Same thing can be applied for winter break as well, although I think probably winter break is less pertinent, because by then you would like to think anyway that your application would have been reviewed and approved by then. All right, so next question, or next screen asks you for which category of service. Unlike your Forms 470, your Forms 471 can only cover either Category 1 or Category 2. So we will actually have to do 2 of these to complete the process of demonstrating both of them. But we'll start with Category 1, so we'll select Category 1 here, and we will move on. The next couple of screens are really just to review the data that you have already entered, and this is information about your district and then about the individual entities within your district. You want to just take a quick look at these and make sure that this does in fact jive with the data that you have regarding your different entities. So we'll save and continue. You can see here that then it gives a full breakdown of all of the related entities. It lists not only your non-instructional facilities, but your instructional facilities as well. You can also see that you have your number of students. You have numbers of students eligible for C2 budget, and then the categories or the percentages for CEP, and then also the ability to view any annexes that might be associated with those buildings. We'll save and continue. And then once again, you can see how the discount calculation was made and the numbers upon which it was based. I do encourage you to take a quick look at these and make sure that they match up with what you submitted to us on your discount data sheet. If they don't, we'll talk about what to do with that, but it's a fairly simple fix, but you do add some layer of administrative headache, I guess for lack of a better word, to the process. So hopefully you did get those data updated in Epic before the close of the administrative window that happened last Friday, so you won't have to mess with that. But we will cover how to address that if you were unable to make those adjustments. We'll save and continue, and we're ready to add a funding request. Start by clicking the blue Add FRN, and we're going to give this funding nickname. We're going to go C1 Connectivity. Is this funding request a continuation from a previous year? This is going to be no in 99.99% of the cases. If you have a question about whether it's a continuation, what it comes down to is that if you had something that started last year but didn't get finished and you wanted to continue it, we might actually have to say yes there, but it doesn't have to do with if you're in the second year of your 5-year contract. That's not a continuation. You're starting a new request for new funds for this funding year just based on an existing contract. The copy FRN function, while it is not effective in the it's not effective in this sandbox that we're playing in the training portal due to some of the system limitations. It is an actually quite effective tool if you have a situation where on a yearly basis you ask for essentially the same category 1 connections each year, or ask for funding for those. You can reference a previous year's Form 471 with all of the same funding requests, all the same information, and you can have that copied from that old application into this new application. It's a really handy tool, and I would encourage you to use it if you have the ability to, and particularly for larger schools, if you don't have lots of changes that have taken place from one year to the next, a larger district might find this to be very, very useful. Don't hesitate to use that. It does ask you for the prior Form 471 number that you want to import all of the funding requests from that one into this one. It does assign new numbers, so it really is just taking that old data and populating this application with previously used data, simply because that data really hasn't changed from one year to the next. And then it's going to ask for service type, and with category 1 there is only one service type, so the one that's selected, data transmission and/or internet access, is the correct one on this example. And we continue. Most cases you're going to be going with contract. If you had a 1-year situation or a one-off kind of situation, you might be going month to month or using local tariff services. But either way, you're going to select these, and again, in most cases, it's going to be based upon a contract. We continue from here, and now it's going to ask us to associate a contract. Now, this is the point where I always jump off and demonstrate how to enter a contract, because you might have gotten to this point and then realized, oh, wait a minute, I can't associate a contract because I haven't actually entered any information about my contract into Epic. So how do we go about doing that? Well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to take a right click on the tab, and we're going to duplicate the tab, and then we're going to go to that duplicate tab, and we're going to navigate ourselves back to our landing page. From the landing page, you're going to go to your district information. And the way to do that easiest is just to use the text next to the welcome underneath the logo for USAC. We click on that. It's going to take us to a summary of data about our school district. And then it also, as you can see, has tabs across the top. You want to move all the way over to the contracts tab and click on that. Now it's going to provide you with a list of contract instances that have been entered into Epic over the years that Epic has existed. These do not go away, for what it's worth. Once they are created, they are there, and they are there in perpetuity, at least for the time being. The ability to delete old contracts is or contract instances is not currently available. And that's probably for good reason, because if you have referenced a contract, they need to keep that information even if it's not actively being used. All right, so in order to enter a new one, we're going to click on the Manage Contracts button up in the right-hand corner, and then we'll scroll down to the bottom of the list, and we're going to click on Add a New Contract. Once again, we're going to say, give it a nickname, this contract. And we're going to give it a name that's going to help us remember what this contract is for, and maybe even who it's with. The contract number, if there is a contract number that is assigned to the contract between yourself, either assigned by the district or assigned perhaps by the service provider, you want to enter it here. If there isn't any, you can use your local telephone number. I kind of fat fingered that one, but that's okay. And enter that instead. But you'll note that there is not an asterisk next to the request for a contract number, so it is not a required field. And we can save and continue. It's going to ask you if you would like to upload a copy of it. I'm going to say no here, but I'm also going to, at the same time, I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and do that. Upload a copy of the contract. Why? Because they're going to ask you for it anyway, especially if this is the first year that you've been dealing with the contract. They're going to ask for it during the course of reviewing your application anyway. So if you want to skip the headache where something falls into your inbox and it says, you know, Epic Administrator request for information or something like that. I don't know about you, but every time I get one of those in my inbox, I go, uh-oh, now what? Just save yourself the emotional stress of experiencing that at least for once, and go ahead and upload your contract. That way you don't have to worry about them asking for it later. All right, so we said you would have uploaded your contract. We'll move on. Is it based on a state master contract? Now, the questions for these, we're going to assume in our demonstration that this is a contract that you have struck or your district has struck directly with a service provider, in which case that is obviously not a state master contract, so you would say no there. Is this contract based on a multiple award schedule? In all but the rarest of instances, this would be a no. You are not selecting multiple winners of a contract. You've got one winner for each contract, so it would not involve a multiple award schedule. Can other applicants piggyback off this contract? Again, this is probably going to be a no, because you and your service provider have a mutual agreement, and it is an exclusive one. So you would say no here. And then the question is, well, was this contract originally created by a different applicant and you're piggybacking off of it? You're going to say no here as well. This is, again, in our example, one that your district has struck directly and exclusively with a single service provider. And again, these are the most common answers. If you have any questions about whether that applies to you or not, don't hesitate to give call, ask the question. Was an FCC Form 470 posted for the product or service you are requesting? If you have the answer to that, and the answer to that is no, you might as well just not even bother to be asking for money, because if you didn't post a Form 470 for your services, or somebody didn't, and we'll talk about this when we go to the Category 2 example, yeah, if there wasn't a Form 470, you've got no basis for a competitively bid contract, and therefore what you are asking for both in your contract and in your Form 471 will be denied simply because it was not a competitively bid contract. So you need to be saying yes honestly here. How many bids were received? This is straight up how many were received, not how many made first cut. How many actually came in. So even if some were disqualified based upon you indicating that you had disqualification of the requirement that a service provider can provide services to every single building in your district, and somebody applied and they can only provide connections to 3 out of your 5 buildings, so they automatically get tossed. They would still get counted here in terms of how many bids you received. So we might say 5, again, however many you received. And then it's going to ask you to search and find the Form 470 that was used to establish this contract. You can search by build entity number, you can search by a Form 470 number, or you can search by a nickname or a partial name that's associated with the Form 470 that you filled out or that somebody filled out. Just be aware, though, that if you have an error in any one of these 3, if you've got all 3 of them filled in and you hit search, it's going to spit back nothing, and you might end up being brutally confused by, well, why is it not spitting back everything? The easiest thing I find is to just simply search by your build entity number, and that's going to be your district build entity number. That's not one that's associated with the buildings, but rather the district as a whole, which is going to be a 6-digit, and it's going to be starting with a 128 or a 129. So we're going to click search, and we're going to get a list. And you can see that we actually have a total of 21. So if you don't see it at first, note that you can either go forward or backward through your list. Note also that you have clickable headings, so that if you want to sort by funding year, you can do that way. You can do it that way and find the one that is applicable to this particular contract. So you find it, give it a check mark, click Save and Continue, and now you've associated that Form 470 with this particular contract instance. Again, an account number or a build telephone number, if you've got it, go ahead and enter it. If you don't, again, note it is not a required field, so you can move on if you need to. And then we're going to search by service providers. If you know the SPIN of the service provider you're using, you can type it in. You can also search by the name. Understand, though, that if you search by name and you get one letter wrong, you're not going to get your result. You can search by partial. So, for example, I can search by one word, and it will give me all of them that start with that as the example. Or, again, we'll search now, and we'll come back here. And this is, let's see, this is a 140100003, I believe it was. And we'll search. Yep, there we go. So you can see that obviously the most accurate way and the most effective way of making sure that you select the correct service provider is to just enter their SPIN in the first place. Then you're going to check that off and Save and Continue. And now we have associated a service provider to this contract. Is it a multi-year contract? Oftentimes, Category 1, for example, it is. So we'll use that as an example for now. And it's going to ask you, what is the date that you awarded your contract? Well, it might be, I don't know, just a couple weeks ago. So let's say last Monday was when you went through your bid evaluation and you selected your contract awardee. We're going to Save and Continue. Does the contract include voluntary extensions? Again, this is a common approach. You might do a 3-year contract with an option for 2 annual renewals. So with that being the example that we're thinking of, we'll say yes, it does. And it's going to ask you, what is the contract expiration date if all extensions are exercised? Well, that would be 5 years. So that would take us through 31, I believe. Is that right? 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. It would be 30. No, it would be 31. It would be June of 31. June 30th of 31. There. So again, with the example of a contract for connectivity, for data transport, typically those are going to be hopefully you've gone through the process of making sure that your expiration dates line up with the funding year of E-rate. If you haven't, let's have a conversation about how we can get you to a point where that is the case, because that does present some challenges in the long run. Ask how many contract or extensions are left on the contract. Again, we're using this example of this being a fresh contract with a 3-year initial term and 2 extensions. So we have 2 extensions remaining since this is the beginning of the contract, and the total length of the contract, if we were to exercise all extensions, I'm going to recommend you just simply say the number of months based upon the first date of the funding year, which is July 1st. So if that were the case and this is the expiration date, then that would be a 60-month contract. So that's the way I'm going to recommend you go ahead and do that. Quite honestly, I've never seen this field used in any fashion, quite honestly. It might be something that's being used in the background at USAC, but I've never seen it appear on really any of the data that we regularly use. Even in the open data sources, I've not seen that. So, you could base it upon today or whatever date you are filling out your application and say, okay, well, this is end of January, so there's plus an additional 5 months. It would be 65, 60, 65. They're lacking proper guidance, as we do in this particular instance. I would just simply say base it upon the beginning of the contract, or the contract start date. Is there a statute, rule, or a restriction that prohibits publication of the specific pricing for this contract? Unless there's something really, really unusual, you're going to be saying no here. If you have to be saying yes because there's some sort of price confidentiality agreement that's built into your contract, just be aware that as soon as you say yes on that, you are going to be getting questions about why. In fact, if you say yes, it's going to ask you, what does this have to do with anyway, whether it's state law, local rule, court order, or contract executed with restrictive terms. And then it's going to ask you for some additional information or additional support documentation. You will hear about this in PIA if you in fact click yes. They are going to ask for supporting documentation or at least a link to the law or the information somewhere that shows that there is some confidentiality required or expected. Again, most of the time you're going to be saying no here. And then we'll save and continue. And we get to reviewing and confirming that our entries are correct. So just take a moment, make sure that you've got all of the proper information entered here. Once you're satisfied with it, you can click complete. Again, as I mentioned earlier, once you click complete, it's locked in, and if you need to make a change to this particular contract instance, you would actually really just need to start over and create a contract instance that has the correct answers and information in it. So we're going to click complete, and you can see then that it's been assigned a contract ID number, and we can come back to our Form 471 where we are asked to associate a contract to our funding request. We're going to click search, and you notice that the one that we just entered, this Connectivity 2026 Bob's Internet, is the one that we just entered. We click on that. It does drop some additional information in. It pulls that information that you just entered into your Form 471. Then you enter the service start date and the contract expiration date. Note that it asks for the current term of the contract. So if you are in the first 3 years, then it would be the end of that 3 years. If you are going into an annual extension, then it would be the end of the contract, the end of that extension agreement, which in most cases is going to be June 30th of, in this case, it would be 2027. But if we're going to have a fresh contract, as we're saying, we said this was 30 and was June 30th of 30. There we go. And we can continue. Get to this here. Okay, so now it's going to get into some details about your requests and what it is that you're seeking. Under certain circumstances, special construction, maintenance and operations, and network equipment can be eligible under Category 1. Generally speaking, it's not, but there are some exceptions to that rule. We're gonna use the example of no here, but I do want you to note that if you click yes, it's going to ask you then and start diving into some specifics about what it is that you're seeking, whether it's a special construction, maintenance, and or networking equipment. Depending upon how you answer each of these, that will determine the set of questions that is associated with the rest of this funding request. I'm going to say no here, but at the same time, if you have a funding request for any of these three things, please don't hesitate to give us a call. It does get a little bit convoluted, for lack of a better term. It gets thick. It gets a little complicated. So don't feel like you have to go it alone just because we didn't go through the example here. So we're going to say no at this point. What we're really going to ask for is the funding for just the monthly service that we're requesting. The narrative needs to explain what it is that you're receiving. Something along those lines. It does not have to be grandiose. It does not have to be, Tolstoyesque in its length or in its description, but you do need to at least give a basic explanation for what's here. This is new. This is kind of cool, actually. I'm pleased to see this myself. Yep, exactly, Justin. They're asking you, and in fact, it is a required field for whether you are planning to apply for reimbursement yourself. In other words, you're going to pay in full for the full year and then request reimbursement, which would be you, the applicant, and filing a bare form, or whether you want discounted bills from your service provider. I do recommend that if you haven't had that conversation, please make sure that you inform your service provider that that is your selection. We are told that later on in the year, there will be a new addition somewhere else in Epic where you will be able to request a change to this selection. But as of right now, it's kind of locking things in. So I think it's best if you and your service provider are on the same page prior to getting to this point in the process. But as I said, you probably won't be locked into it for good, but this is a way of at least informing your service provider in one fashion, I suppose, that you are electing for them to provide you with discounted bills. All right, so now we've entered the information about what I refer to as sort of the shell, the FRN, the big container, but obviously we've not specifically said what kinds of things we're getting in terms of our connectivity. We need to add line items to this to ask for the specific services and lay out the cost. So we're going to start with we're asking for data. We're asking for internet access service that includes connection from any applicant site directly to the internet service provider. That you are not asking for. Why? Because you're not asking for internet access service. Your internet access service comes through your NGKI connection. Are you asking for data connection between 2 or more sites entirely within your network? That would be exactly what you're asking for in 98% of the cases. You're not asking for a connection to, again, to an ISP or regional estate where internet access is billed separately. That's something that that occurs on different types of applications, and obviously you're not asking for internet access service with no circuit. You're actually asking for the opposite of that, which is the data connection between 2 or more sites in your application, or excuse me, in your district. Fiber, copper, wireless, other. I think everybody's got fiber, so we'd be saying fiber. It's going to ask you for the type of connection. You've got all your DSs, D3s. You can see that if you are asking for dark fiber, you've got dark fiber here that you can select. And you got the DCs, the DSs, OC3s, OCN, switch megabit, Ethernet, MPLS. Just depends upon what your service provider is providing to you. And if you aren't sure of what that is, give your service provider a call. They should be able to identify that for you pretty darn quickly. Save and continue, and now it's going to ask for a download speed. We're going to say 10 gigs, so we'll just select the 10 and the gigs. Notice that it automatically entered the 10 gigs for the upload speed because the Ethernet selection that I asked for on the previous page is full duplex, so your upload and download maximums are the same. Is it burstable bandwidth? Can you, does your connection give you the ability to jump over that 10 gigs for a very short period of time to avoid bottlenecks? That would be, again, a question that that you would need to ask of your service provider. And if it's yes, they're going to ask whether, you know, what speed that is. If it's no, then obviously they're not going to bother to ask that. But again, have that conversation with your service provider if you don't already know the answer to that question. All right, so is this a direct connection to a single school, library, or non-instructional facility for internet access? The keywords here are for internet access. You are not doing this for internet access. You are doing it for data transport because your internet access, obviously, as we just said, comes from your NGKI connection. So you're going to be saying no to that. Is this connection between eligible schools, libraries, NIFs a connection that provides a wide area network? That is exactly what we were just describing in explaining that this does not apply. Does it include firewall services? You can say yes, you can say no. It's completely based upon what is provided. I think in most cases, you're probably not getting firewall services in between your buildings, but if you do, there's where to say it or where to indicate it. And just be aware that those firewall services need to be bundled with the data transport that's being provided to you, and that the those firewall services need to be billed as a part of the cost associated with the data transport that you're getting, and doesn't have a separate cost associated with it. All right, so we're going to save and continue. And now we're going to get to the money. Now, I'm going to take a quick break and just talk about how to organize your line items within the funding request. Let's just use the example of you have you have 5 buildings in your district. Of those 5 buildings, you have 2 non-instructional facilities, and they both are connected at the same speed for the same cost. You can put those together, and actually you can take any entity that's receiving services and lump them together as long as the same it's the same service and the same cost, and you don't have any cost allocations to do as a result of any, for example, pre-K students that might be at your school or at a particular school. So let's just use this example. You've got 5 schools, 2 non-instructional facilities. Our 2 non-instructional facilities have this 10 gig connection, and the cost on that service is, I don't know, I'm just going to say $1,000. That may or may not be in any way, shape, or form realistic, but we'll use that as example. They're the same speed, they're the same cost, no cost allocations. So we're going to join them all together on the same example, and the monthly quantity, we're talking about 2 recipients of service at this speed, at this cost. So those 2 will go together on here, and you can see then that it's done the calculation for you for those 2 locations. We're going to go 0, 0, 0. Over here, if you do not enter the zeros over here on the right-hand side, once you try and save and continue, it's gonna put up some red text and say you can't go on because these are unanswered. So just save yourself the headache and go ahead and fill in the zeros on that side as well. And then we're going to save and continue. Now, I know that we talked about 5 buildings and blah, blah, blah. You're going to see the full list of buildings in your district, both non-instructional and instructional facilities here. In the example we're giving, we're saying no, that 2 of them are the same, but here we go. That 2 of them are the same, the others are not. So you're going to select the ones that are receiving one of these connections, of the 2 connections. So you're going to select the 2 that are being grouped together in this line item, and then we're going to add them to the line item, and those are the recipients of service for this particular line item. Now we're going to keep going, and we're save and continue and save and continue. So we've covered 2 of our 5 buildings. We're going to have to continue then to add FRN line items in order to add all of our buildings in the district that are connected. Come back to our Ethernet, save. This example, let's say that this is our 3rd school, and our 3rd school might only have a 5 gig connection, and no on the burstable, no and yes here. These all remain the same because these are consistent one from the next. However, let's say that this happens to be your elementary school, and just for the sake of complicating things, because this can be complicated and might very well be for you, if you have pre-K kids in your school or in one of your elementary schools, you are going to have to do some sort of cost allocation to account for them as ineligible users. I know that there are rules out there, and some districts don't even allow the kids to get on. USAC doesn't care. You have pre-K kids, and they have to be accounted for in some fashion in your funding request for that building. And that's why we would separate this building out from any other, is because we have to do a cost allocation. If we were to group all of the buildings that had 5 gig service at $500 per month, and we did a cost allocation here, it would cost allocate for every single one of those buildings rather than just the one. So you'd be shorting yourself by the amount of cost allocation on a monthly basis for as many buildings that don't have those kids in them. So we need to do some sort of cost allocation. Now the question becomes, how do you do that? Well, it's kind of up to you. USAC doesn't provide a lot of guidance other than to say that your cost allocation needs to be based on tangible criteria and comes out to a reasonable result. Or so what does that mean? Well, okay, let's give a couple examples. Let's say that you're in an elementary school and there are 100 drops in the school and there are 5 drops into pre-K classrooms. 5 out of 100, what's that, 5%? That's pretty easy. 5% of 500 would be, if my old middle school math is correct, that would be $25. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but you can see then that it does the calculations for you. And then in this case, we're talking about just one monthly connection that's affected by this, and it does the calculations further in full for you and does that cost allocation. Now, that's one way you could do the cost allocation. You might actually find that you have a better or a smaller cost allocation to do if you use the number of pre-K students versus the whole number of students in the district, or excuse me, not in the district, in that building. So if you had 500 kids in the building, yeah, Damon's trying to correct my math, and I'm sure you're right about that, Damon. I think more importantly is the example of how you can calculate that cost allocation. Again, so number of drops could be based upon the number of pre-K students. If you happen to have granular data to show that, there's like just a tiny bit of data that actually flows from those particular affected drops, you could base it upon data traffic that goes to those schools, or excuse me, so those classrooms. It just really depends upon how you want to and how deep you want to get into doing that, conducting that kind of cost allocation or that kind of analysis in order to make sure that you're maximizing the amount that you can get back. If you have any questions about that, again, feel free to drop a line. We'll be happy to help you through that process. And then we'll save and continue. Oh, see, it's going to bark at me because I didn't fill out the other side of the ledger. And then we save and continue. Again, this is going to ask you, was it for all of them? Oh, no, it was just for school A. We add school A as the recipient of service. We save and continue. And then save and continue one more time. And then we would add our final FRN line item that would, again, be very similar, but in this case, whoops, Ethernet. And this one might be, I don't know, 15 gig, and the bigger schools. No on the burstable, but again, we're going to group them together. Why? Because they have the same speed at the same cost. That's why they can go together on the same line item. If they have differing, you're going to have to split them out. And there is no cost account allocation for those. Monthly quantity, 2 more. Save and continue. And then again, we're going to have our recipients of service. Oops. Oh, back. I didn't select the 2 that were going to be affected. Add them. There's our 2. And save and continue. Save and continue again. We'll come back to the FRN line item. And then if we save and continue again, it's going to take us back to our actual funding requests. There may be need for, in certain circumstances, if you had multiple different things. If, like, for example, you were going to do, if you were going to have requests for Category 1 eligible network components, that you would have a separate funding request, a separate FRN that would be associated only with the actual construction or the maintenance or the equipment that you might be needing. But this basically is you've finished the 471 for just the data connectivity at this point. It's now a question of whether you're feeling comfortable with everything that's there and you think that it's ready to submit. Notice that when I click this, it says it's going to give a few more validations. It's going to take a look at things and make sure that it's ready for certification. Are you ready to proceed? Yes, we are. Notice that it's going to say, well, we can either send it, and actually it takes a couple of seconds to generate the PDF. And this is required. You're going to have to do this at one way or another. Probably going to take a few seconds just because there's probably other folks banging around on Epic systems. Yep, there we go. Okay, now this is a link. I do encourage you to take a look at what would be the paper version of this if it were to be printed out, review it, make sure that it has all of the information accurately represented in what you've just submitted. We'll go back and we can take a look at there's our first FRN line item, 2 recipients of service. Yeah, we had school A and school B. Yep, that's correct. Check it all again. 5, here's our cost allocation for our elementary with pre-K. There's our elementary with pre-K. Imagine that it had a separate name and a separate location. And then we have our last 2, maybe our middle school and high school that get the 15 gig connection. No cost allocation. Yep, everything looks good there. Yep, there's our schools. All right, so we're happy with that. Now that we've taken a look at it, we're going to check off the box and say, yes, I believe that everything on there is correct. And you have a choice. You can either send for certification or you can move on to certification. To send for certification means that you are not going to be the person that actually finishes this certification process. This is rather going to be like you might have a finance officer or the superintendent, who are the folks that typically sign off on those applications for you. There you're going to send for certification. Just be aware that if you're going to send it and you want to send it to them, if you want them to be able to fill it out, they have to be Epic users as well. So your Epic administrator is going to have to make sure that those folks have a Epic account in order for them to access it. If you do click send for certification, it's going to create a task in the tasks list. And it's going to take you, and it's going to pull you out of the application. The person that is going to certify it will need to not only have have an account, but that account will have to have rights that are assigned to it to have full rights to the Form 471, which will allow them to do the certification process. I think in most cases, you all are going to be the person that actually does the certification. So let's move on to that very quickly. And we'll see that, excuse me, this summarizes what you've requested, shows the non-discounted portion, and then it's going to ask you for a total budget amount that's allocated to resources not eligible for E-rate support. Basically, this is asking, what's your technology budget? If you have a technology department and the department has a budget, you could use that figure. If you want to use as an estimate your TAR report total from last year, you could use that as well. It's really just this is really just them doing due diligence to make sure that you have funds to support use of the connectivity that they are providing through the funds that they're going to help you with on this application. So this might be, I don't know, 150. That's probably big for some of you and small for others. I'm just using numbers so that we can have them in here. These next 2 questions are basically, they're kind of little gotchas. If you say yes to either one of these, you're going to get either strictly denied or you're going to get a lot of scrutiny. The first one asks, are you receiving any funds directly from a service provider listed on the form, on any of your Forms 471 filed by you for this funding year? You are not allowed by rules to accept funds from the service provider to pay the non-discounted portion. Therefore, If you have to truthfully say yes, just truthfully close this out and forget about applying for funds, because you're going to be denied anyway. So you're going to be wanting to be able to truthfully say no there. And then it asks, has a service provider assisted you in locating funds to pay your non-discounted share? I would share an old story, but I've shared it so many times that those folks around know the old MCI story. They set up a foundation and then started funneling funds through the foundation back to the districts as charitable donations to then cover the non-discounted portion. And back in the days when MCI still existed, they got in a lot of trouble for that. And unfortunately, a lot of districts did too. So again, you're going to want to be saying no there. If they offer to help you with that, I would politely decline. I do encourage you to take a look at what you're signing off on when you click on these certifications, but basically you are certifying that you are following the rules of the program and that you understand that it's conditional based on a number of different things, and then you are ready to click certify. So I won't go through those one by one, but I do encourage you to take a brief look at those to know what you are attesting to. Why? Because when you click certify, it's going to threaten you with jail time and miserableness if you are misrepresenting yourself in these certifications and on this application. So make sure that everything is in order and you understand what you are doing, and that you are attesting to what you at least in good faith believe is accurate. And we click yes. You're going to get this. I suggest you just take a quick screenshot or print a PDF of this page, because this is obviously confirmation that you have submitted. The other thing that I would encourage you to do here is to click on this link where you can then go access it's not generated yet, but if you continue to refresh this page, sooner or later, a PDF version is going to show up and be available down here. It's taking its time. Again, there may be folks. There we go. And then now I recommend you go ahead and grab a PDF copy of the submitted version of the form. Questions at this point? I'm going to, while you might jump in, I'm going to also clean up here and head toward the landing page so we can start a quick example on category 2. Any questions thus far? Doesn't look like it. Nope. Okay. Then let's go through an example of category 2, and I'm just going to blow through this really quickly. Yes, I'm going to leave that empty for now. All right, so obviously here there is a difference. You want to make sure that you are selecting the correct category of service. Once you select a category of service and click Save and Continue from this page, if you wanted to get back and change it because you selected the wrong one, you're just going to have to delete it and start over, because that category of service is locked in as soon as you click Save and Continue. Again, next 3 pages. Looks very much the same as the last time. Review, review, review. All right, now we are ready to add a funding request for our Category 2 networking equipment that we are acquiring through a mini bid process. Mini bid 2026 APs. Oh, look at me. I must have my caps lock on. No, okay. Is it a funding request continuation? No, it's not going to be a continuation. You're not going to copy in this case. Why? Because you, in all likelihood, would not have had exactly the same funding request as you've got this year for last year or a previous year. I'm sure that speeds, changes, models, all those speed changes, models, those things have all, price, those all have changed. So you're really going to be starting from scratch. All right, so our example is starting with, we're talking about, let's say, routers and switches. Those are internal connections. Make sure that you are selecting the correct one of these service types, because that can come back and bite you rather harshly. You know, and you also want to make sure that your Form 470 references the correct service type. Otherwise, again, that mismatch is going to result in some headache, if not lost funds. It is going to be based on a contract. Excuse me. We'll continue. Now, when you get to this point, you're going to search for the creating organization. First of all, make sure that the other 3 items are empty. And then you're going to take this number out, whatever your district number is, and instead you're going to enter 128821. That is that's the entity number for the state consortium, and that is where you will find the state contract references that you need to associate to your mini bid that you're now requesting funds for. Now, of course, I just changed that. What was that? 148? Was that right? 178? That's clear. 148. I thought that was right. Nope. All right, let's back forth. That'll be back in there. 178. Okay. Search. All right. So once you've set in 128821. And by the way, that number is listed on the contract matrix, and the contract matrix is available on the EDCS in the resources section. So you can grab a copy of that if you need to, so that you can associate the correct service provider with your funding request. So now you're going to select or either search by contract ID, or you can just use the list below and sort it by either the contract number, contract ID, and you want to make sure that you don't confuse these. When we use the term, or when they use the term contract ID, that is the USAC assigned number, whereas the contract number is something that's assigned either by, in the current example that we're using, either by, well, it'll be the KDE's or the Commonwealth's master agreement number that would be listed there. If you do take a look at the contract matrix, and here is the contract matrix, by the way, you'll notice that we do have the 128821 listed here, so you don't have to remember that off the top of your head. And then we clearly identify it as the USAC contract matrix number, or the contract ID number, excuse me. And you can use this matrix then and the associated contract numbers and IDs and names to, and for that matter, the spins, to make sure that you're cross-referencing the correct one. So you'll find that one, and then you'll find it in the list. You would, let's see, let's do this way. There we go. And there we go. And then you select it here. It's going to come down. It's going to provide you with the information about the contract here. The service start date is going to continue to be 7/1. And then the contract expiration date is listed on, let's see, did I put that on there? Contract expiration date would be, yes, here we go. There we go. So the contract expiration date, 6/30/27. So we would enter that there. 6/30/2027. And then continue. All right, so then the narrative, again, brief description of the services that you're acquiring, or the equipment that you're acquiring, and then select whether it's the service provider or you, the applicant, who is going to be filing for reimbursement. And then it's time to move on to the line items. This is going to look and feel very familiar, only it's going to ask you about different kinds of internal connections. you can see here that we've got data distribution, protection. Protection is like UPS's. I see your question, Justin. For mini bids, how do we know if the contract we associate is manufacturer direct instead of vendor reseller? Well, you should know who got your contract. I mean, you'll know by your selection whether that is a manufacturer or reseller. So you will know that when you look at this, you'll be able to find the contract ID number. So if you know that your winner was, and I'm just using Fortinet as the example because it's right here in front of my face. If you know that your Fortinet, the manufacturer direct, you're worried, if you will know that your bid that won came directly from Fortinet. You would also know that it, in different cases, that it either came from Encore or Step or Trace, or for that matter, any of these others that are resellers. So you should know during that process whether they are whether they are the manufacturer themselves and you're dealing with them directly, or whether you're dealing with a reseller. I think in most cases, folks are kind of doing most of the business through resellers these days. That having been said, you may still be dealing with, I think Extreme still does some manufacturer direct stuff as well. So if you're not absolutely sure, reach out to your selected winner and ask them if you don't absolutely know. But then once you see, no, that's a good question, Justin. Yeah, you don't. It's really depends on just who won your mini bid process. You find them and then find the contract ID and cross-reference this contract ID number to the one that you selected when you selected the contract. All right, data distribution. You'll notice then that once we select that as a broad category of option, then you have routers and switches. If you were going with access points, obviously that's going to be wireless data distribution. You'll note then that we have access points, antennas, LAN controllers, wireless controllers. If you had others that might be a transceiver, might be licenses, et cetera, et cetera. So it depends upon what it is that you are getting. But in our example, we might be doing access points. I think I mentioned access points in my nickname. So we'll use that as the example for here. Again, you're going to select the make, the manufacturer, whoever that might be. I'm going to pick somebody that's not on any of our contracts just for the sake of being unbiased. And then you give the model number, like a XYZ123, whatever that model number is. If installation is included in the price, which I think generally speaking it's not. I think most of those, if not all of the contracts, have a separate cost associated for installation. You're probably going to be saying no there. And then I don't think anybody's really doing leases from those contracts at this point in time. So that would also be a no. We'll save and continue. Monthly our monthly costs. So this isn't monthly service. So these are going to all be zeros on this side of the ledger this time. And now we're going to move over to our one-time unit costs. And again, I'm going to reiterate, if you're getting multiple, you're getting multiple units, and they all cost the same, and they are all the same. They are all the same services. They provide the same thing. That you can group them together as long as, again, the same unit and same cost. If, however, you've got a couple of units that are going to go into an elementary school where that elementary school has pre-K kids, you're going to want to separate out that number into its own line item, again, so that the cost allocation doesn't hit every single one of the pieces of equipment. It only hits those that are going to go into that school building where there is pre-K present. It might be, I don't know, wireless access points. What do access points run? A good one, maybe $1,000. I don't know. In this case, we'll say that right now, this bunch that we're going to get is all going to go in places where there are no pre-K kids. So we're going to put 0 there. And then we might be buying, I don't know, 45 of them at this point. And there's the cost. And then we're going to save and continue. Oh, dear me, I forgot. It really doesn't matter which one I choose because there's zeros on that side of the ledger anyway, but it barked at me. All right, so we'll save and continue, and then it's going to ask you, is every entity receiving this? In this case, we might be saying no because we might have a different location that does have pre-K, and so we'll have to separate those out. We'll add them. There's our recipient of service. Now, if you have 45 of them and they're going into 3 different buildings out of 12 buildings that you've got in the district, you just select the 3 that it applies to, or however many it does apply to. And friendly reminder that access points that are going to go into a non-instructional facility are not eligible for E-rate support. So just keep that in mind as well. And then we're going to save and continue. This will take us back to our FRN line item list, where we would continue to build this out based upon the different items that we are purchasing through these particular contracts. Now, that having been said, we can come back here and we can create other FRNs that are associated with a contract that we might have struck up ourselves for, and I don't mean ourselves as in OET or KDE, but rather you as the district. You might have a cabling contract. You might have wiring that's going into a building to replace some existing wiring. That's getting fairly common these days. That would be a separate project. You would have to create your own instance of the contract and associate that contract with it. But you can put those other Category 2 requests on this form as well, if you'd like. That having been said, some people like to separate out based upon the project or based upon the provider. So let's say, for example, we've got a bunch of CETS contract-based purchases, and we're going to put those on one 471, but then we've got a wiring project, and we're going to put that on a separate 471. You're welcome to do that if you like. Some people will argue that there may be benefits to doing it that way, because if there are questions on the one about your wiring project, that might end up holding up processing of your CETS contracts, or vice versa. So it's really up to you. I haven't seen that to be a significant problem, but I know that it can happen. So something to be aware of if you decide to put everything on the same 471. That is really quickly summarizing pretty much everything. Now I've gone about 15 minutes over, but that doesn't surprise me. I tend to be long-winded. So I will shut up and ask if there are any additional questions at this point. Again, we will have this session shortly hereafter, probably sometime tomorrow. We'll have it posted to the media portal, and you will be able to access it through the EDCS, the district collection site. No questions? Wow, quiet bunch today. It is a lot of, I've heard this before, if you've heard it before, so hopefully it's been a good reminder.